Hello, and welcome to Women with AI, the podcast dedicated to amplifying the voices and perspectives of women in the ever-expanding field of artificial intelligence. Today, I'm thrilled to be speaking to a media and entertainment lawyer, someone with extensive experience helping clients manage legal risks while protecting their creative vision and business goals, who is recognised as one of Europe's foremost legal experts in generative AI. But before we jump into having a conversation, let me tell you a little bit more about her. Kelsey Farish is a media and entertainment lawyer with expertise that bridges the gap between traditional media law and new technologies, which has led her to specialising in Gen AI. At Reviewed and Cleared, she supports a variety of clients across the audiovisual, publishing and media sectors, as well as those in the creative and performing arts. As an intellectual property and technology contracts lawyer by background, Kelsey's specialism lies in advising on the intersection of personality, publicity rights, copyright and the use of Gen AI, such as deepfakes. Kelsey was named as a rising star, one of the UK's best up-and-coming female lawyers in 2023 by Law.com, and is recognised as one of Europe's foremost legal authorities on AI-generated content. She advises companies and individuals on contracts, deal negotiations and business strategy, with a particular passion for publicity laws and audiovisual content, which has led her to being recognised as, well, not just Europe's, probably one of the world's foremost legal experts in Gen AI. In addition to her day job as a lawyer, Kelsey regularly speaks at industry events and has appeared on national news programmes to discuss deepfakes, AI, intellectual property and internet regulation. She's an advisory board member of Vera AI, a European research consortium working to combat disinformation, and her contributions appear in peer-reviewed journals. She also regularly collaborates with policymakers and academic researchers. So Kelsey Farish, welcome to Women with AI.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here. So that all sounds phenomenally exciting. So can you tell us, please, about your journey from traditional IP law to becoming an expert in AI and media? Like what sparked your interest?
Sure. Well, I mean, just listening to you kind of chat through what I've done over the last 6 years, I mean, I felt like I just needed a nap listening to that. It's been a really busy time. I should say that it was all really kind of a happy accident, and it was sparked by just a real, genuine passion for the movie industry. I'm originally from the West Coast. I've always really been into films, and part of that has meant, staying on top of Hollywood gossip and trends, right?
Mm-hmm.
And about six years ago, I came across what we now know as deepfakes. And Scarlett Johansson was interviewed by the Washington Post, and she was complaining, rightfully so, about this new technology that was putting her face on top of pornographic actors' bodies, and it was being shared on the dark web, right? And in this interview, she said that there was absolutely nothing that she could do about it from a legal perspective because there were no laws that could regulate the sort of content, much less its spread on social media or Reddit or otherwise. And being a relatively junior lawyer at the time, I thought, oh, that can't be right. Surely there's some law out there that can get, that can help her out. And so I sat down and I basically did a lot of research over the course of a couple of months. And I realized that the situation is really complicated. And so I ended up writing, as you said earlier, a peer-reviewed paper on it. And it turns out that it was one of the first big pieces of research about AI and media law. And from there, it just really picked up momentum. I've just always been really interested in how people can protect their image. And AI completely just distorts that whole ecosystem from a legal perspective.
Yeah. So why is there no law against it? Is it because it's so new, and are you working towards there being a law, or is it just too difficult?
So the issue is really this. So if we take Scarlett as an example, Scarlett herself, when she works on a movie, she herself doesn't actually own the copyright in the videos that people take of her. And so if someone was to use that content in a way that was unlawful or, it was unwanted, like it harmed her reputation in some way, she can't use traditional intellectual property laws to get it taken down. And so that's the first obstacle. The second is, even if she could use intellectual property laws to get it taken down, well, you can't just flip the switch and turn off the internet, right? Like a lot of this stuff, once it's online and it's going to get shared far and wide. So we know that we can't really rely on copyright. Well, there are other legal tools in our toolkit. So we can look at things like publicity laws. But publicity laws and rights of persona and personality, they're called different things depending on where you are in the world, they only apply in certain situations. So, for example, in the United Kingdom, you typically have to be a well-known person in order to have the right to your own image or your own face. It sounds crazy, I know. Whereas in other jurisdictions, it's kind of a human right that, you automatically have the right to your own name. So we look at these things from different angles, and it's not really because it's created by AI, it's just because the whole ecosystem is complex. And it gets tricky because AI and the content that it generates is so lifelike that audiences and individuals who are viewing the content are getting increasingly confused and manipulated. So in speaking about it from a legal perspective, it's not so different than if you had like a photograph that you were then sharing online without permission.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time you can look at a photo and be like, well, okay, this has been doctored, or it's a sketch, it's been manipulated. But AI just kind of confuses that whole thing, and we just don't know as viewers what's real and what's not. So this is a long way of saying it's complicated because of outdated laws. There aren't enough laws on the books, and even if there were laws, it's really difficult to enforce.
Because she managed to get them to stop using her voice, didn't she, with the more recent
Yeah, that's right. But
issue.
again, she wasn't really relying on a legal doctrine or a legal principle there. She was using PR.
Yeah.
She basically did a open letter that she shared with journalists. And then that public pressure and, OpenAI, they didn't want to get a bad reputation. They didn't want to be seen to be doing something that was maybe unethical. But can you imagine a situation in which someone, let's say, you were having your voice being used? Are you going to be able to afford an expensive lawyer or a fancy PR team to put together a letter? And even if you could, and it was published, like, let's be real, like, who's going to pay attention? Usually people are paying attention to people like celebrities. Or other powerful people. So again, this becomes a much broader conversation about the rights of everyday people who are being impacted by these technologies as well.
So what happened when because you did the research into it, and then is that got picked up? Is that right? Because no one else had done that.
Yeah, that's right. So it just happened to be that I guess I was just really stubborn, and I wanted to see, I was just really curious, right? And this is a great example of allowing your natural curiosity and the things that you're naturally interested in kind of lead your way, I suppose, because at the time there were a few academics who were thinking about deep fakes and generative AI, but most of them were focusing on it in the political context. So people wanted to explore what could happen if you had a deep fake of, say, the president, threatening nuclear war or something. People were really focusing on that from a national security perspective. And I was one of the first practicing lawyers to really say, well, that's fair, and that's a really important topic, and we also need to discuss the criminal implications of intimate image abuse, as it's now known. But there's this whole other body of law, which is intellectual property, which is publicity, which is, everyday people and the rights that we have to our own face. And I think it was just because I was one of the first movers in this space and just really, really obsessed with solving this problem. And now it's kind of become, I guess you could say, like my life's work. I just think that the issue of how we as individuals, how we appear in the public sphere, how our face, how our voice, how our LinkedIn photos are used, these are not just silly, trivial things for a celebrity gossip magazine. Even though that's where a lot of the case law begins, it really, in this day and age, it has to do with all of us who have a presence online.
Yeah. We had a situation at work recently where someone decided to go to one of the leadership debates before the elections took place, and didn't go in a capacity for representing the council or anything. Just went along, and he's there in the front, and he got picked up by the BBC. They were filming because whenever someone was saying something, he was like nodding his head or shaking his head,
Mm-hmm.
and it was, and I think the Daily Mirror picked it up and said, "Oh, shaky head man, noddy head man." They're like reacting to Nigel Farage exactly the way
Yeah.
the rest of us are thinking, but unfortunately, it got picked up, and some kind of like far right Twitter group
Mm.
picked up, but they must have reverse searched his image to find it, but then
Mm-hmm.
was doing it, and they picked and chose what they were going to take from LinkedIn to say, well, he's doing this, and it was completely unfair. I mean, it's all blown over now, but for a weekend it was really awful, and it was thinking, well, is it quite funny at first, and then it's like, well, no, it's not funny, and so he's had to lock everything down because
Mm.
his image is out there, but you're right, people can do whatever they like with the image once it's there.
That's right. And I want to pick up on a word that you said there, which is unfair. And, so often we see things that are mischaracterizations of what people have done or what they've said. And, if you take a second to pause and think critically and evaluate the full picture, the circumstances, right? Like, who knows? Like, maybe a facial grimace on camera, maybe that's because, you've got something stuck in your shoe and you're kind of playing with your sock or whatever. The law, unfortunately, doesn't really care what's fair or not most of
Mm-hmm.
the time. It just wants to know what's in the statute book or what a judge has said. Now, of course, the law is informed by social and normative constructs of fairness and equality. But a lot of the time, just because something hurts your feelings or it seems unfair
Mm-hmm.
or it doesn't really pass the common sense test, unfortunately, that's not good enough to bring a lawsuit. So again, taking that as an example, presumably if you're on a television show, you'll sign a waiver that says, yes, you can use my image or
Mm-hmm.
clips of me and you can share it on social media or what have you. Um, and then what happens once that is shared is really left to other people, and other people can misuse it. But
Mm-hmm.
let's say someone misuses a clip of me on YouTube, right? Like they take an image of me from a interview that I've done or a podcast, and they manipulate my voice with AI, and they say that I'm going to vote a particular way in which I'm not. If I wanted to get that taken down, there are a lot of steps I have to go through. It's going to be expensive, it's going to be annoying, it's going to be taking a lot of my time. And a lot of the issues as well is that it's really complicated. There are a lot of steps involved. And also, it's going to be like psychologically draining as well. So it's a hugely complicated issue.
Is the law? Well, I'll ask you that question. I just said when you were mentioning about the political context of images, because you said just before we started
Mm,
recording that you'd been speaking about Donald Trump and the Swifties and like
that's
sharing,
right.
pictures of Taylor Swift fans saying that they support Trump. I mean, yeah, can you sort of expand on how that comes about or what that means?
Sure. So just for your listeners, for their context, basically Donald Trump recently shared a couple of images on his Truth social media platform, in which we have some AI generated young women who are wearing t-shirts that say things like Swifties for Trump. And he also shared an image of Taylor Swift herself stood in front of an American flag, pointing her finger, saying, Taylor Swift wants you to vote for Donald Trump. And he retweeted these and he said, okay, I accept, as in, I accept this endorsement. So the issue that we have here, there are a couple. And the first is if you have an image of a well known person like Taylor Swift being used in the context of a political campaign, that's a big no no. So her lawyers are going to be, probably writing to his campaign saying, we don't approve of this. They might also seek to have a cease and desist letter if they can find that he's sharing images that he doesn't have the copyright to. They could also, if they can demonstrate that her reputation or her brand has been damaged, typically there has to be a financial implication, but if they can argue it, then they could also sue him for defamation, right? Because it might be a untruthful statement that he's purporting to be factual, and that in turn harms her reputation. Those are a couple of things. The other issue has to do with these images that are AI generated. These people that he showed the pictures of, they don't exist in real life.
Yeah.
So you might ask, well, what's the harm? It's just like a fantasy image, right? Well, because it says Swifties and because it's like using her name and her brand out of context, well, I could go on and on, but you can see why there are a lot of different angles that we have to explore here the good news is that typically speaking, when you are a political candidate, there are rules about what you can and can't say. So in this case, he's attempting to manipulate the public into thinking potentially that a well-known individual is supporting his campaign when they're not.
Mm.
And that's just, it's not the done thing, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd expect that her lawyers are going to be pretty busy this week.
And is the law, is it catching up? I mean, I mean, I imagine it's quite slow and quite a difficult process to get laws changed or get things, because a lot of these laws do exist from before, well, maybe from before the internet existed, before AI.
Yeah, they do.
So
I mean,
how,
the
yeah,
Copyright Designs and Patent Act here in the United Kingdom, that's from 1998. No, 1988. I was going to say it's from the year I was born, right? So it's no one was using the internet really in 1988. Um, it is catching up. Just it's sometimes used, I use this example all the time, but like we have to think too that, when we take a picture, when we're outside and we take a picture of a flower or whatever, we have copyright in that image that we take. However, it took a Supreme Court case in order for the law to recognize that photographs are capable of copyright protection. Because before then, the law basically said you have to be a human in order to have copyright protection over your work. And that makes sense, right? But the reason that it had to take a Supreme Court case is because even though I think most people would recognize that a photographer should have the rights to their own photos, because the letter of the law said, you have to be an individual who takes a picture, and a camera is technically a machine, you had to have some lawyers who were skilled who could debate this, and that happened in the 1880s. So I think that what we're seeing now is yet another example of, wait a second, the technology has progressed, and even though certain people might have these quote unquote common sense approaches to things, you need the law to catch up. And yes, people are on both sides of the Atlantic trying to figure this out, but I think it's going to take a couple more years before we get some new updates to intellectual property law. In the meantime, we are seeing more and more regulation on social media, as well as more and more regulation on things like political campaigns. But again, we have to be really careful to not override freedom of expression or freedom of speech, as it's known in the United States, because we don't want to say outlaw the use of AI in creating content just because it could be harmful, because AI can be used for a lot of really cool creative things as well. But what it's going to depend on is the context of that image or that video or that piece of music.
because you've just come back from the Locarno International Film Festival, where you're invited, weren't you, to discuss AI in filmmaking. So how does that work? I mean, what's the film industry concerned about, would you say?
Yeah, so a lot of filmmakers right now are rightfully really concerned about two main things. And the first is content inflation. And the ease with which we can now create media with artificial intelligence means that there's just a lot more out there. And a lot of it can be pretty good. I'm not saying like a full, feature length cinema ready film, but we can use AI to create pretty good clips or B-roll or, enhancements. So the more content that's out there, the harder it is to get your production noticed by financiers or people who want to go and see your project, right? The other issue is, of course, job displacement. Actors are worried about having digital replicas being made of themselves without consent, and people like colorists and editors and people who work as film extras, they're also worried about getting out of a job because AI can now do it a lot faster, a lot cheaper, maybe not as good, but budgets are tightening, and with inflation and costs and all the rest of it, it's just creating a really crazy uncertain time for the industry right now.
Yeah, because I guess might think, oh no, surely you must have lots of money to be able to do it, and it'll be all the high end, top
Mm.
grossing, high budget films. But yeah, maybe though, is it opening it out so that people that haven't got much money or haven't got the kind of big studio behind them, then they can kind of try and get into the filmmaking
That's
industry?
right. And that whole concept is known really as kind of like democratization of filmmaking. And we see this as well. It was like people who might not normally have access to expensive studio quality, special effects teams, they can now use generative AI tools to create pretty cool stuff that audiences are going to want to see. Or indeed, they can use software that will help them improve upon their script or, create more interesting or nuanced characters, right? We can use
Yeah.
ChatGPT to review a script and offer improvements or suggestions. And so these things are really exciting. But again, the flip side of it is, well, wait a second, you're potentially putting a screenwriter or a editor out of a job. But an interesting comment that was made by a producer who used to be at the British Film Institute, actually, so her name's Katie, she's at Henway Films. She made the comment, which was, well, if we don't somehow make films with our reduced budget, then everyone's going to be out of a job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that this is an example of a necessity for people to kind of maybe adapt with the times and grow with AI as opposed to saying that it's horrible and evil and no one should use it. I definitely think there's a gray area in between. We need to be cautious of it and we need to use it responsibly and ethically. But I think that saying, oh no, all AI is bad and we shouldn't use it at all in our creative endeavors, I don't think that's necessarily the right approach either.
No. And I guess, yeah, I could say from a lawyer's perspective, that it's probably like challenging and exciting. And
Yeah,
like a
it's
whole
really
new, a whole new
challenging.
world.
It is, and some of the things too. We've spoken, you and I, in the last few minutes about things like legislation and things like lawsuits, but there are other things that we can do to control the use of AI, and it's kind of boring maybe, but it's what I do day in and day out, which is draft contracts. So even though a law doesn't exist right now that says, you can or can't do this with AI, if you were working with, say you're an actor and you want to work on a film project and you don't want them to use AI on your face,
Okay.
you could write into your talent agreement, hey, I'm happy to be an actor in your film,
Yeah.
but I'm going to include this clause that says you, studio, will not use my face and manipulate it with AI. So there are different approaches that everyday people, you don't have to be a Hollywood celebrity, everyday people can use to kind of have some control and agency over your personal identity or over your other creative content. So it doesn't have to be legislation. You can also use things like contract law as well.
Yeah. So that's why people need you on their
Yeah,
side.
yeah, exactly. I spend a lot of time looking over a lot of fine print, and usually clients will say, "Well, can I do this? Can I do that?" And I'm like, "I mean, you can have a go. We can write it into the contract, and it's up for the other party to decide if they want to accept it. You might not get away with it, but it's always a really interesting thing because I get to spend a lot of time negotiating and thinking about the common sense implications of what they want to do to get their story made or their business deal across the line.
Yeah, because I guess sometimes you want to protect your likeness and you want to make sure. And then I'm just thinking, was it Gladiator? I mean, how old that film is now, I don't know, but was it someone? But someone died before the end. I can't remember his name now. This is terrible. I should have done the research. But one of the actors died. It was a really famous one. And so they were able to use some of the old footage to then put it together so they could finish the film. I mean, I think that's
Yeah,
happening.
exactly.
So that's the kind of, I mean, it wasn't obviously good for him that he died. It was awful before it was finished filming. But that's the kind of, yeah. So there's always more than one side to the story.
Definitely. And it's interesting that you say that because that's actually how the statutory right of publicity was born in California. So basically, you had a very famous actor and he passed away, and the film studio wanted to use old clips, nothing to do with AI. They just wanted to use his old clips and put them into a new film. And because they had the rights to the film, and obviously the film studio had the copyright in the clips, they were like, well, this is cool. We're just going to do this. Well, not so fast, said his kids. This actor's kids say, no, you can't use our dad in this way. He never would have wanted to participate in another film. And oh, by the way, he's going to act, quote unquote, in this new film, you need to pay the estate for it. And that basically led to what we now know as, well, it's the California Civil Code 3344A, but you can go look that up later. But that gives people a automatic right to their image and how it's perpetuated online or on film. But yeah, this kind of thing has been happening for decades, but AI makes it a lot easier. And one of the things too that I'm always quick to say is that, we used to have this idea that when we walked into a cinema, excuse me, we knew that what we were about to see was going to be fantasy, with CGI and other special effects. We know that Luke Skywalker is not actually zooming around in outer space,
Mhm.
but we no longer have that threshold of walking into a cinema because everything that we see in the palm of our own hands when we're looking at our phones, we genuinely don't know if it's real or not.
Yeah. And I've fallen for scams, or you see pictures and you think they're real and you're like, oh my God, look at this. And then you're like, hang on.
I mean, I've fallen for deep fakes as well. I mean, a couple of years ago, again, to use
Mm.
U.S. politics, because even though I'm an English lawyer, I'm originally from the States. Um, I retweeted a voice deep fake of a particular former president saying something really idiotic. And because it matched my own political views and my own, I suppose, like my own biases, I didn't challenge it. I didn't think, oh, wait, did he really say that before I retweeted? No, I just
Mhm.
retweeted it because I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, he's an idiot. Of course he said this crazy thing. And then it took me a few minutes before I thought, wait a second, that's even crazy, even for this person.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I say that all the time. Even me, like
Yeah.
someone who's like an expert in this field, I fall for them too.
Like, because we're saying that AI can create harmful content. Can it be used as a tool to try and detect that, though?
Yes, it certainly can. So that's the Vera AI project that I've been
Mm.
working on. And here you have incredibly intelligent computer scientists from all over Europe who are working to use AI as a detection tool. And so what they'll do is they'll use AI to analyze certain behaviors and certain sentiments that people are picking up online. And they can group, like it's crazy. It looks like a spider's web. If you zoom out and you imagine like Twitter or other social media platforms is like this crazy web. You can actually
Wow.
visualize little clusters and overlaps. And if there's a lot of activity around a certain phrase, so for example, Southport and immigration, if those
Mm.
words are being picked up a lot more than normal, then AI can hone in on those areas. And it can also see if videos are being used that are maybe
Wow.
manipulated. So again, artificial intelligence, at the end of the day, it's just a tool. And what we do with it, that's where the real critical thinking needs to come in.
Yeah. It's how we use the tool as humans, not just the tool itself. Huh.
I think that's right. And something again that I heard at the film festival was we need to be the ones using AI. AI shouldn't be using us. Or, you know, I would say taking advantage of
Yeah.
us. And part of that, and not to go into a full like criticism, political or socioeconomic criticism of capitalism, but I think we also have to hold these very powerful individuals who are the CEOs of these tech companies to account as well.
Hmm.
Because social media platforms, they love sensationalism. Crazy stuff online drives advertising clicks. And that's how this whole model works,
Yeah.
right? They want insane, crazy, fascinating, wonderful stuff to be on Instagram or X or wherever so that you look at it and that you buy stuff off of it. And unless we find the right balance between protecting people from what they're seeing and then also allowing people to express themselves and explore new ideas, well, I think it's just the whole problem is just gonna become exacerbated. And I don't have the right answer. I don't know what the right answer is, but I would say that as the mother of like a small kid myself, I am a little bit worried about what's to come unless we start adding in some safety rails and some guardrails to our online ecosystem.
Yeah. Because I don't want it to like take away creativity or stifle anything or become the norm that you're not sort of thinking for yourself
Mm,
or doing that. I mean, looking to the future, AI. I mean, I think we've gone through like it's going to take over the world. It's going to take all your jobs. So actually, no, it's not. It can be used for good, or but it can
mm.
still be used for bad. I mean, are there any upcoming sort of trends that you're either concerned about or excited about? I mean, that's sort of two questions, really. But,
Yeah, I would say the trends that I'm most excited about is what you said earlier. It's about giving access to different ideas and concepts that people otherwise might not have had access to. I think of it like taking a group of school kids to a modern art museum that might never have had the chance to see works of modern art. In the same way that when we go to museums or we go to concerts and we get inspired by what we're experiencing, and then we turn around, we go home that day, and maybe we write a poem that was inspired by something we read or we saw. That's not that we're ripping off the existing creativity necessarily. We're just inspired by it. And I think that we can have, dare I say, dialogues with these generative artificial intelligence platforms where we can say, hey, I've got this story, or I've got this idea, this business plan, like help me refine it. Let's get access to it. Like the AI tool can draw upon billions upon billions upon billions of files and utilize that information. The issue is, are they doing it in a lawful and responsible way? Like in the same way that you pay for a concert ticket or you pay for Spotify. You don't just download files off the internet anymore. I mean, I had Napster when I was younger, so I know all about pirating content. But I think that that's really exciting, getting people exposed to things that they might not otherwise have access to. The thing that I'm probably most afraid of is twofold. And the first is the prevalence of these AI manipulated tools that are so subtle but so powerful in terms of improving people, quote unquote, improving people's face or their skin tone or their weight. That's really scary because it's sort of addictive. You take a selfie, you've got a spot on your cheek, you go into the tool, you airbrush that away. Oh, well, actually, if I just press one more button, my hair will look better. And if I just press one more button, then my teeth will be perfectly white. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And I do worry about the mental health, especially amongst young girls who are going to be growing up with that. And that's worrying to me.
Yeah, I think that's where education is going to play a massive part in not just not letting students use it, but also not embracing it too readily without the right rules and regulations in place, but also just talking about it. And that it isn't what you see. I mean, I grew up, I was talking to a friend the other day, we're like, oh, do you remember like Kate Moss and Heroin Chic and in the late 90s, and it's like you were supposed to be really skinny or you're supposed to look like this and that way. And it's always been there, but it's just easier to access now because, everyone's got a mobile phone. Kids are getting them, you don't know what they're sharing at school. So yeah, that's I think, yeah, good to educate people.
Yeah, you and I both grew up with hair, and I remember looking at photos of Kate Moss or similar, and I wonder. I'm not saying that it necessarily would have, but I wonder if I might have been spared a little bit of anxiety or maybe a little bit of like stress over my own body image if every single photo that I had seen of a super thin or beautiful model in a magazine, if maybe it had a warning label on it that said, hey, this image has actually been photoshopped.
Yeah.
Or, hey, reminder, this person's job is to not eat very much and to wear clothing and walk down a runway.
Yeah.
This is not what 99% of other people look like. And I'm not saying that like we need to have a police force or a nanny state or anything like that. But you were absolutely right when you talked about conversation. Is what we're seeing actually real? And just knowing that things that look real might not be.
Yeah. Well, I've seen more and more people, even just on LinkedIn, they'll say that this content was, it was like curated by a human but made better with AI, or kind of generated by AI but curated by the human. I think it's that caveat or it's that label that will have to go on everything. Because, we as adults, you sort of think, oh, yeah, obviously that's airbrushed. Obviously no one looks like that. Obviously. But as a young, impressionable child, whether you're male or female, that's going to be difficult to tell.
Absolutely. And, a lot of artificial intelligence has been happening without us even really knowing it for years and years now. So, I'm old enough to remember when Netflix DVDs came in the post, and it was a really exciting thing to sit down on my dad's computer and pick out the 3 DVDs that we wanted that week. I could choose one, my brother could choose one, and my dad could choose one. And then you watch them and you pop them back into the post, and then you got your next 3 DVDs, right?
Yeah.
And now you log into Netflix or other streaming platforms, and my Netflix account looks very different from my husband's.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because artificial intelligence knows my demographics, it knows my viewing habits, it knows my other activities, and it uses that information to curate, there's that word again, to curate recommendations. And this is great because it means that I'm actually getting shown things that I am probably going to want to watch rather than some random sports biography or something that my husband wants to watch. But it comes back to transparency. I think that if these tools or if these platforms said, actually, hey, Kelsey, you're being shown stuff that our artificial intelligence thinks that you want to watch. But hey, if you opt out of this or if you turned off this personalization feature, maybe you're going to see something that you might not have been shown that might broaden your worldview in a different way. And that I think is really exciting as well. So I want to get into a situation where maybe we're challenged and inspired to look beyond the algorithm.
Yeah, no, you're right, because otherwise that's when it starts to limit what you see. You're only going to see the things that it thinks you want to see, and it's not going to know that actually you might have an interest in shark fishing.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly
or that you really love. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's just like we all get really comfortable in our own routines. And I've probably listened to the same Spotify playlist about 19 million times. Why? Because I know what I like.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you, but I just remember that feeling of just like listening to the radio and you hear something for the first time that you wouldn't have found some other way. And
yeah,
that's exciting to explore that new avenue. So again, this has to, the thing that I'm discussing now is like echo chambers and biases. And that's not an AI issue. It's a broader social media issue. The real question is, do we just let the tech giants and people sort this out for themselves? Or do we need a law that says, actually, if you're going to do an algorithm to recommend content for people, you always need to give people the right to opt out? In the same way that we see with cookies, those cookie banners that are so annoying, but they're actually really good, right? Because then we can figure out, like, we can make the decision for ourselves. So I don't know, maybe I would like to see a pop-up that says, hey, Kelsey, do you want to opt out of this personalization and maybe see something that you otherwise might not have? I don't know. That's a good idea.
Yeah, should do it. Right, well, I could talk to you all day, Kelsey, but for any young professionals or students that are interested in it, because you've got such a cool job, but in the intersection of AI and the law, what advice would you give them how to prepare for their careers?
I've been really lucky in that, like, I basically got lost on my way to drama school and ended up at law school instead, right? And so I've just always been really interested in film and television, and my natural interests in those areas led me to pursue intellectual property, and that in turn led me to AI, right? And it sounds super cheesy, but don't let anyone make you feel like what you're interested in is stupid. Like if you're younger and you're really interested in dinosaurs or space or whatever, gosh, just follow it, because let me tell you, if you're lucky, you're going to be around working for a long time. And I would say that 30, 40 years is a very long time to be doing something that you're not interested in. And if you're interested in it, there's a chance that someone else is going to be interested in it. So don't be afraid to just sit down and put in the hard work and learn as much as you can about a subject or subjects that interests you. And who knows, you might be the first person to ask a question like, wait a second, is there really nothing Scarlett Johansson can do about AI generated media? It's just because I asked the question. I sat down, I read a lot of books and articles, and no one had the answer. And so I tried to find the answer myself. And you'll see this as well with scientists and other explorers. It's just because I asked the question, I had the courage to pursue finding an answer.
Fantastic. I love that. That's great advice. Brilliant. But where can people find you, Kelsey? Is LinkedIn the best place?
Yeah, LinkedIn's great. Also, kelseyfarish.com. I have a lot of stuff up there, whether it's, little bits of advice for people who are creatives and they want to know how to protect themselves. I'm doing a lot on reputation at the minute. So kelseyfarish.com, and I'm always very happy to have a virtual coffee with people who want to chat through these issues. I'm going to be trying to go to as much of the upcoming BFI London Film Festival in October. I'll be around for real life coffees then and trying to catch as many films too as I can.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Can't wait. Well, Kelsey Farish, thank you so much for coming on Women with AI.
You're so welcome. Thank you.